Same.
Yeah, no, I love your art. I have never seen anything like it before, and it really brings me back to my childhood. You know, I feel like Mexican parties are singular, you know, and there's a sense of like urgency in your celebrations that I find really beautiful and something that I couldn't see as a child. And with your art, it's something that it really highlights, and I love that idea.
There is a lot of intergenerational trauma that I feel like we often take those times, those moments to really, I guess, to celebrate, to be in the moment, to be with family, to come together. The older I've gotten, the more I've gone back to those memories and, you know, realized how important they were in making my identity and ultimately now, you know, the work that I want to do.
I love how extravagant these pieces are, and they just really take me back to that idea and that time. I also am intrigued by the use of icing. I love that idea of pleasure in something that is so pleasurable that sometimes it turns into disgust.
Yeah.
And there's a word that we have, empalagoso, right?
Right, yeah. We, you know, celebrate our birthday, we have a cake, sing happy birthday, the 3 happy birthdays, and then blow the candles, and then we get our face pushed into the cake. And I always thought it was so common, and it wasn't. Yeah, and I would ask my friends, you know, like my American friends, and they were always like, we don't do that. And I always found that so interesting. Like how violent it is, you know, but this idea of like celebrating and then, you know, a little bit of like torture to be able to celebrate. And then I link that to, you know, growing up Catholic and that same kind of mentality of celebration, but then also, you know, not being able to fully celebrate, or the struggle to attain something pleasurable.
Yeah, like getting your face smashed with a cake. You know, I too thought everyone did it, and it turns out no one else does. And so partly is that Mexicans really revel in absurdity. Like there's a sensibility and a sense of humor that is very particular.
Definitely.
And I feel like your work celebrates that idea of like, it's just so silly, you know? And I think oppressed people oftentimes, that's how they react to oppression is by laughing at everything, because
100%,
it's just so painful. So like, how do you cope? For immigrants, for people of color, the fact that there's so much potential, so much creativity that isn't allowed to flourish because of the conditions that we live in.
So my parents are both from a rancho that's in Jalisco. It's called San Jose de los Marques, and, you know, kind of like Los Ojos. And they met there, they got married, and then they moved here to Chicago in the 70s. But they were always working in field work in Texas. Both of my great-grandparents on both sides were braceros. And they, nice, And, you know, all of this I found out later through sort of trying to investigate my family history, because, you know, it's often not talked about for many reasons.
My parents also immigrated in the 70s in the trunk of a car rather than the hood. I was fascinated by that. I was like, oh, how did that even work?
Right.
They were crammed in with like a bunch of other people in the trunk, and it sounded like a very traumatic experience. And you know, I think that's something that a lot of people don't talk about, because you know, like, how do you tell your children like about the really horrible times in your life, you know? So sometimes it does take some investigating, you know, to figure out like who our ancestors were, who our parents were. So I'd like to know about how you grapple with the guilt that comes with being like a child of immigrants and being able to like live a life that is so different from your parents, and the fact that you're able to create art for a living. I mean, that is just so special. And so
growing up with my parents always telling me stories of what home was like back then to them, and you know, stories of growing up in a completely different environment, having less. I feel like all of that influenced me in wanting to make work about my family. It just started off as that, as I would take Polaroids that they had from the 70s and replicate them as drawings. And so I feel like I was able to excel so high because of that, because it was always implemented in me as this sort of gateway to be able to do whatever you want and not have to work, a factory job, etc. There's still that, I think that guilt that comes with constantly trying to succeed over work, like your own kind of labor, I think, that gets translated from their immigrant labor to then you as being first generation and trying to make up for that. And it's like, I think often a slippery slope, because I find that it doesn't equal to, I guess, redemption.
I know I grew up poor and I was like, I'm gonna be a poet. Like, who the fuck does that?
Right, yeah.
Like how in the world are you gonna make money?
Yes.
But it was like the only thing I wanted to do.
Same, yeah.
And so like, did you have that moment where you're like, this is who I am and this is what I'm going to pursue?
I got to high school and took all these classes that my siblings had taken, APR, and I had a teacher who really invested their time in me and taught me about how to apply for college and how to have a good portfolio, and even gave me like supplies for my first year of college. And I always think back to how important that was. And he was also my two siblings teacher.
Oh wow.
So there was kind of like a familiarity there.
Growing up, like who was it that really inspired you, and who inspires you now?
I would say Frida.
Classic, yes.
I don't want to say
I know
for the many reasons now, but I would say her because the way that she captured her life through her paintings, and all her portraits, and being Mexican. I mean, it was kind of my only the only artist that I knew that had a similar, I guess, lineage as me that I could see myself through. And I still love her work. I just hate the way that she's been commodified.
Yeah, I totally get it. I often don't want to bring her up either. Like, of course I love Frida. Like, who doesn't love Frida?
Right. And I would also say Pepón Osorio, a Puerto Rican artist, installation artist who creates these like amazing installations that recreate barbershops. He talks a lot about like masculinity, trauma, to also very like decadent, excessive. So I would say those two, even through undergrad, high school, seeing their work was really inspiring to me and continues to inspire me.
There's not much diversity in the way that art is taught.
Definitely.
I remember, being in college, and I was in art history, and there's just like, I was bombarded with just Renaissance paintings, which I adore, but it's like, well, I would love to see, paintings by people of color. For young people to see the possibilities.
Exactly.
So important. So like the fact that you're succeeding, like you're going to inspire people who come after you. And I think that is so critical in order to change the way that this world works. It is not encouraged for women to seek pleasure, especially Mexican women. Like, we're supposed to be sacrificing ourselves for our families, like martyrdom, and for you to reject that is just, I think, really powerful. To be like, I deserve to be an artist and live the way that I want to live, and to create these pieces that really celebrate that sort of indulgence, even though sometimes that indulgence could lead to like darker themes, right? But the fact that you're able to really engage with the senses, and there's something very sensual about the work too, and so that's not something that we're encouraged to be or to do.
I think I'm thankful that my parents were both supportive, that they were willing to accept the fact that I wanted to pursue art.
Yeah. What can art do? And like, why do you dedicate your life to it?
Yeah. I think it can tell a story. I think it can also change a story. And I think that's really why it's so important to me to be making work that I wanted to learn about, that I wanted to be able to see myself through, but I couldn't. And so I think about that through making the work too, that I'm able to add something to like this art historical canon that doesn't maybe have so much space for women like me.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about the Luz Festival. Like, how did you become involved in that? And like, why do you think it's important to have those kinds of exchanges?
It's been really awesome to get to meet Sara Uribe and, you know, to have read her book, and it really resonated with me, you know, the way she talks about a certain kind of trauma in Mexico, but the kind of like, thinking about the kind of implications of that, and then being Mexican American here, and, you know, like familial trauma and how it's all kind of interconnected in a way, and then thinking about another writing that she had sent, more of like a memoir. It really brought up the sort of ideas that I was grappling with when I was making that video, and I just thought it was amazing that her work was able to, I guess, inspire me to think about that video again, and how we're talking about similar ideas about like the body and violence, and it was kind of like a perfect fit.
That's really exciting. Yeah, I did the festival a few years ago. We went to Mexico City, and it was just so amazing. It was my first time in Mexico City, and it's such a like cultural hub, and it's so important. And I'm Mexican, and I'm like, I've never been here. It didn't seem right that I hadn't been, and so like the fact that they gave me that opportunity was just so awesome, and to you know talk to other writers who are Mexican, and writers that I didn't even know, and I feel like there's so much going on there that I am so unaware of, and to be able to like get a little glimpse, I thought was just really exciting. And so the
work comes from being Mexican American, but then showing the work in Mexico, I'm very interested in what kind of like conversations will come up.